G'day, welcome to Bent Brewers Live, proudly brought to you by Bent Spoke Brewing Co. Here we are sitting in the cannery again, doing another little show. Got a great lineup for everyone tonight. But first out, I think we should just raise a glass to all those people in Victoria and WA that are gone back into some sort of restrictions there. So if anyone's watching, our thoughts are with you, our beers are with you, and hopefully you all get through it as you've done in the past. So... But we'll move on a little bit. Don't forget to fire in your questions tonight. Big merch pack out to whoever gets the best couple of questions, and we'll no doubt chuck some beer in there as well. So fire in your questions. We're really keen to hear what people have got to say, and the team will look forward to answering those for sure. Just a little bit of housekeeping. We've got this little 360 can lid here, and everybody still thinks that it changes the flavour of the beer not to have it on the can. I can tell you now, we haven't changed the beer. It's definitely the same beer. But not only that, why haven't we got it on all our beers anymore? Well, it's not our fault. We literally can't get the lids anymore, and manufacturer in the US has stopped making them. And not only that, the EPA in New South Wales has decided to ban them. And the reason why they decided to ban them was because they contribute to the litter stream. Our little amount of lids in the whole scheme of the beer world contribute to the litter stream. I must say there's a few other breweries that use them, but, out of 3 breweries, we contribute to the litter stream. Can you believe that? Can you believe that we contribute more than PET bottle tops, than stubby tops, or any other disposable lids that come off packaging? I feel there's something a little bit more to that story that we need to unearth at some point in the future. But that's why we don't have our can lids anymore. So hopefully everyone will get to know that and won't think that we've changed the beer, and the beer's still, to me, tasting as good as it always has. I'm excited tonight. We got Hottest 100 as our topic. Obviously, little Ben Spoke down here in Canberra did pretty well this year in the Hottest 100, and Crankshaft snuck in and grabbed top spot. So we're all pretty proud here. So why not do a show and talk about it? I mean, after all, we all love talking about beer, and I don't think we can ever stop talking about beer. I think we all need to talk more about beer. So tonight I've got the co-founder of GABS on the show, Steve Jeffers. He's also co-founder of Stomping Ground, co-founder of the local tap house. He's got a few co-founders there, so he obviously got some pretty good mates, I reckon. Also, we've got one of Australia's greatest craft beer commentators from Ale of a Time. We have Luke Robertson. Great to welcome you on the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us at Richard's Soapbox, I think. Is that what we're at?
Look, Steve, let's start with how it all started. And I'm sure there's a story behind how GABS Hottest 100 started, or even GABS for that matter. Must have started over a beer, surely.
The best things start over beer, Rich. It was obviously originally for the first 6 years, it was called the local tap house Hottest 100. And it came about simply because there was a bunch of customers and staff talking about the Triple J Hottest 100. And someone had the idea that why don't we all vote for our favourite 10 beers it was back then. And I set up a Survey Monkey survey, very amateurish, and sent it out to our customers, and people voted, and we came up with that list, not knowing clearly what it was going to become 10 or 12 years later. And in those days, as we were just talking about pre-show, is that Crown made the list at 91, I think it was, and Hahn Premium, but there was a real diversity as people genuinely voted for the 5 or 10 favourite beers of their year.
Yeah, great. And Luke, you started Ale of a Time, back in 2010, so 11 years, and it's now one of Australia's, best beer sort of podcast, I guess you call it. Do you talk back shows? How do you feel about that?
It's a bit of everything these days. Not so much a blog anymore. I do a little bit, mostly around GABS once a year, which seems to be the post that most people want to read. And then the podcast is weekly now, and other bits and pieces connected. So it's been really fun starting off as a hobby and was part of a university course that I was doing, was to start a blog, and I thought I'd do it about beer, and someone might send me some free beer, and yeah, living the dream now.
And do you does it, like, let's be honest, does it pay the bills? Do you have to work, do other writing jobs, or do you find that there's enough there?
I am part-time working for the Independent Brewers Association, which is good to see. You've got the logo independent seal behind you there, and Good Beer Week. So that's kind of, that probably pays the bulk of our bills, or my bills at least. And then, freelancing around that with a bit of support from the people that support the podcast Patreon. So it's a bit of a hodgepodge existence, but it's a nice one. It's much nicer than working corporate in an office that I used to do.
Yeah, I reckon it's great that our industry's grown so far now, over 700 breweries, I believe, that, can support, professional beer writers. I remember back in the day, Willie Simpson writing part-time for the Sydney Morning Herald, and, really doing pretty tough and having to go and do some, not favourable reporting jobs around town. And now we can see that we've come so far that we've got, people who are full-time writing about beer. I reckon that's amazing. And I think that just shows where we've come from in the last, certainly the last 15 years. I think we've seen a massive, massive change to the industry. And I no doubt think we've probably seen a pretty massive change to the Hottest 100. Steve, what did you make of the results this year? You got a few comments, bit of commentary on what you're taking away from the results?
Yeah. Firstly, I'll say that my opinions tonight are my own. Obviously, you know, and some of your viewers might know and listeners, that we sold GABS about a year and a half ago to a fantastic guy called Mike Bray. So he runs the show now, and obviously that's been good from us with my stomping ground hat on, because we were finally able to participate in the Hottest 100. But I think that the immense growth that it's had over the last 10 or 12 years. I mean, in particular, the last 6 years has been staggering. And as I said before, to one of Luke's points earlier about we all kind of started off as these things without any kind of intent of necessarily growing into whether it's Bent Spoke or Ale of a Time or even the Hottest 100. We all started off just as a bit of a passion and an interest in doing it. And I think that it's original. I think it's gone. It probably needs a bit of a tweak now. I think that there is a danger that the rules that were in place for the first 10 or 11 years or however long it's going now, I think it's probably time to tweak it a little bit, because it's moved, in my opinion, a little bit too far away from its original, the spirit of it. Like, it might be too far gone to put the genie back in the bottle, but I would like to see some tweaks made to it to change it a little bit. But I'm enormously proud of the fact that it engages 40,000 beer fans around the country, which nothing else does in this, to the extent that I don't think anything else really does in the country. It gets people talking about beer, debating beer, which I'm sure Luke will talk about in a little bit. So that's got to be a great thing, that the beers and independent brewers and craft brewers are in the papers or on social media and people are engaged. So I love it from that point of view. I'm really, really proud of where it's come. And this year to see an IPA top the list is something I didn't think for the last 4 or 5, 6 years that an IPA would top that list. So your beer was such a worthy winner and has been poised for the last few years to threaten the top two. And it was great to see you to take the top mantle, and it couldn't have happened to a nicer bloke.
Oh, thanks, Steve. That's a bit of a wrap.
I think just the one thing I'd add there is that a lot of people aren't hugely aware, certainly outside of ACT, of your reputation predating Bent Spoke, and so with Wigan the Pen and the like. And ever since I got into this game about 14 years ago, you have been at the forefront of making outstanding range of quality beers. And so to see one of the old legends of the game, or legends, I won't put old in front of it yet, rise to the top is just a fantastic story. That's not many people, or not enough people knew about you, I think. So I'm really pleased for you.
Thanks, Steve. I didn't bring the box of tissues with me. I'll just have to deal with that. I think we might come back and talk about potential tweaks later. But Luke, what are you thinking about the results? What's anything surprise you or anything stand out?
Not really in terms of surprises. I mean, there's a few names in there, and I'm not familiar with, or I might not really consider to be at the level of the names around them. But the way I kind of look at it is they've managed to get their consumers engaged enough to support their beer and vote for it, which, I think that kind of gets lost in the, people say, all the advertising and the promoted social media posts, and no one's going and voting for Crankshaft if they've not had Crankshaft. No one's doing it with a gun to their head, kind of a thing. I think there is there are prizes, I think, for people that vote. Is there? You get like a
random. The rules have always. I think the rules have always been like.
I mean, like if you vote, you get a random pick. That kind of thing.
Yes, we randomly pick a winner who wins. I think tickets for him or her and 10 mates.
Yeah, so that's a good prize, but I don't think anyone's doing it purely for that prize. So, every beer in that 100 has had enough supporters out there that they might not necessarily support that one beer, but they support that brewery enough to make it into a list of 100 beers. And there are so many beers in Australia. As you said, Crown Lager was in the first list, and people would be horrified to see that now. So, to get that many people on board to really support one of your products, that's really cool. And, whether or not people agree with, number 1 or number 86, whatever, like they've managed to get some people supporting their beer. And if you look through that list and if you were to drink any one of those beers in 2021, you'd know you're going to get something that's well made, well constructed. It might not be to your taste and it might not be, the craziest thing you've ever had, but it'll still be a good beer. And I think that's a really cool thing that I think people overlook.
Good point.
Yeah, I think I don't think you can be popular without being good at something. That's my take on it. Whether you're an actor, whether you're a footy player, whether you have a popular beer, you got to be good at something along there somewhere to be popular. So when people say, oh, it's not the best beers, maybe it isn't the absolute technically best beers, but it's the there's still all the beers that have been voted on in the hottest 100 have got something great about them, I think. So
in the first really 6 or 7 years, I used to read these comments, people saying that these aren't the best beers, and it's never been called the best beers, it's the hottest beers. But I would frequently point people to how I don't know if you recall, they used to have a critics guide or critics choice guide where many of the luminaries in the industry would vote for their favorite or best beers of the year. And if you line them up, there was a lot of common beers amongst them. So yes, it might not be to your tastes, but for many of the beers, as you both point out, quality isn't an issue.
And I think anyone in the industry knows, to get to that top 10, you need to get that beer out at scale consistently to a wide audience. That's not easy, particularly, in the space you're playing with an IPA. That's an incredible feat to be able to do that. And when people say, but the best beers are X or Y, I don't think any beers that I actually voted for made it into the list, or there's one or two, but none of them are getting to scale and reaching the audience. And I think that's a feat in itself to be able to do that repeatedly enough to get that much support.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, Ben Spoke really relies on a lot of really loyal, our real loyal members. We have what we call a membership program called the Drafters, and they're really loyal, really passionate about our beer, and really, they're vocal about it. And, we've always supported our community, I guess, from the start. And I think the drafter community has been, critical in our success, not just in the hottest 100, but actually just being able to grow and build another brewery and get our beer into cans and stuff like that. It's when we ask them, hey, if you feel like voting, feel like dropping us a vote, have a vote. We're not pleading with them. We're not playing the politician and going, you must vote like this, da. We give people guidance on how to vote, on how we want them to vote, but we're not throwing it down their throat. we put a few little signs around the can from Canberra, the can. But I think it does show that we do have a really really good loyal following, not just locally but also around the country as well. And I think for a lot of breweries, that's something that is critical to success and critical to being able to open doors through to different bottle shops and getting your beer nationally ranged. So I think it's worth just pointing that out. I think the commentary though is always fun to look at. It's it's hilarious. It's sometimes serious. It's a little ignorant and unacquainted potentially as well. Luke's been great at calling this out and really talking this up. I don't think I need to say any more. Luke, what do you got to say there about the commentary of GABS?
Look, this year the post was the hardest, and it's getting harder every year because so basically, I pull out the worst of the comments that I find. I make sure to do it only on public Facebook. I don't go into the Facebook beer groups and pull them out. It's people that are commenting publicly, and this kind of doing these articles where I'd pull out these comments and just kind of have a go at them and laugh at how silly and how stupid a lot of these are. It started because there's a lot of racist and homophobic comments on beer articles all the time. Every time the Age wrote about craft beer, it'd be like just stupid stuff. And I think there's no better way to kind of call them out as to make fun of how stupid they are. And then it kind of evolved into the GABS comments, which, unfortunately, the only comments that seem to be negative now are it's the Dan Murphy's Hottest 100, which, it's sponsored by Dan Murphy's. So, tick, you've checked, you've sorted that out. But
I haven't got a check though. Hang on, I haven't received any checks or had any. No one's contacted me from Dan Murphy's. Just putting it out there.
That's a shame.
That's because they can't get through because everyone else is trying to call you.
With the and there are so many beers in Dan Murphy's that don't make the list. That it's I guess for my perspective, to laugh at those comments over and over again, it's kind of like it's really hard to do now. So I really want the people that are angry about it to come up with something a bit more original, so I can pull those comments out and laugh at them.
How long did it take you to come up with the Tom Selleck reference?
Oh, the little graphic. I was proud of that. That was the only reason I ran the article this year, I think, was because it didn't take too long. That kind of came to me. But normally those articles, sometimes they'll take 2 or 3 days to, I'll pull out 100 comments and kind of refine them down into the funniest and the worst, and then kind of work out if what I'm saying is actually funny or mean and there's a couple of times when I've gone away and thought, that was maybe a bit mean to this person, but it's a fun one to do. But I really wish people were meaner online so I could then turn it around on them.
Hey, Luke, you just you've obviously done this now. I think I'm going to say 5 or 6 years or so that this has become like a must-read article that people wait with bated breath for after the countdown results. But of all that, you've just said that much of it's kind of in the same sort of vein. But is there any comment or comments that stand out above all the mundane, obvious ones?
This year in particular, there was the one person that said, I think Stone and Wood is for the mustache, white pants wearing people.
Yeah.
And I couldn't picture who that is in my head. Like, you get the hipster inner city comment. I don't know who's wearing white pants. And that's where Tom Selleck has a mustache and wore white pants. This is the only person I could think of. That was probably the best this year. In the past, it's people going, people sort of typing out like, who even votes for this? It must be some sort of popularity contest. And it's like, it's literally like there's no other, this is exactly what it is. So I really enjoy those people that kind of wander in, think they know everything, but then have no understanding of what they're actually commenting on. That's always fun.
Yeah, it's funny. We had this bloke come into the pub yesterday, and he came in and said, he went up to the bar and wanted to buy beer, and we don't do cash anymore. So he came in and wanted to buy beer for cash, and he tried to bargain with the fact that he was going to spend $200, in the pub, and expected us to take his cash. And we said, mate, look, we just don't do this anymore. And he said, but I'm going to spend $200. I said, well, and the people in the bar said, well, we're not going to take take it anymore. Like we can't do anything about it. We're not taking cash anymore, and we'd love to be able to serve you a beer. I'm sure everyone, everyone generally has a card. What do you do you keep all your cash under your pillow, or what is it that you do? We didn't quite say that to him, but basically, I mean, he's then walked out of the pub and had a massive rant about how Ben Spoke won't do cash anymore, and he's never going to drink our beer again, and he's never going to come back and see us at all. And it's like the end of the world's happened. And one of the greatest comments, I think, it's amazing that on the post that he put up, and I think 90% or 95% of the comments on there are all, giving him a serve, and it's quite funny like that. And I think people, it's sort of like a natural thing for people these days to get sort of just, blurt stuff out and not really think about it. Steve, you must have read a few interesting comments over the years. Have you got something memorable you can share?
I don't remember particular things. I'll tell you, I've got a thin skin, and I can tell you that if you recall, the very first GABS festival at the Royal Exhibition Building, so the one after the ones at the tap houses, we thought we'd come up with, and it was my idea, sadly, but we came up with this idea of kind of like a line where you could get all these tasters and samples, and I thought it was genius. And then unfortunately, when it got very busy, the whole thing broke, and there was like a queue for 40 minutes to get beers, and we got absolutely slapped down big time on social media. And that really kind of, I remember I went to a corner of the Royal Exhibition Building into one of the stairwells, which was because they weren't utilised in those early years, and I just lay on the back and felt the cold concrete on my back and looked up and just thought, what have I done? Because it almost literally sent us broke. But another comment I was thinking of is in the early days, for the first 6 or 7 years before Craig Williams joined us at GABS, I was on the results day. It was just me in the office above the local tap house with 2 or 3 monitors, dropping the results on social media, trying to get in before Crafty Pint all the time, because he would. I think he had it timed perfectly, and I was doing it very manually. And then I had a screen with Twitter, and I was, responding to everything on Twitter, and I just was sometimes just scratching my head with all these comments, like to what Luke was saying before, some of the most inane comments that would come through. But I still have a thin skin. I don't like to read constructive criticism. I welcome any day, but just kind of keyboard warriors, just putting out crap, I find still very difficult to deal with. And in the old days, I used to say in the end, Guy, you read all the Twitter and Facebook comments. You filter them and just give them to me in some constructive feedback. I welcome that, but I don't want to read that bile.
Yeah, well, I must admit, when we first opened Ben Spoke, that was me. I was trolling through every single feed and every single article and replying to everything. And I probably shouldn't have done that late at night after I got home after a few beers either. But now I do read everything. But the best thing is that we have so many fans out there that call out these people straight away, and I love reading some. As soon as a topic comes up, something negative, whether it's it's a quality issue or whether it's an experience issue or whatever it is, there's so many people that call out the person really quickly about it, and we actually don't have to do anything really. Well, we still reply to everybody, but we don't have to do much as a company anymore in terms of worrying about that stuff, because the community does it for us. And I think
that's a really interesting point. And a while ago when I was blogging more regularly, there would be, if a label came up or something came up with a brewery kind of overstepped the line into something that was quite offensive or sexist, there was almost, I'd be the one that would call it out publicly. And now when I see those, you jump into the comments on the Facebook and it's 40 or 50 people really just hammering them. And it happens so quickly. Like they're kind of, within 10 minutes, it's kind of circulated all the Facebook groups. And, people think of some of the beer Facebook groups as being quite toxic and, the nerdy beer geeks. But there you see the same voices in there that kind of are the leaders of those groups as well, saying this isn't cool. We need to, be better than that. And, and then from my perspective, I'm like, oh, it's great. I don't need to say anything. I'll just stay out of this one. It's really cool.
Yeah. We found that as well. as well. But GABS, as it got bigger and the followers got bigger numbers of, and the same with the Stomping Ground and the local tap house, is that these days, you're absolutely right, is that there are people defending you quicker than you could in many cases, and it's also better. I much prefer people defending us than us trying to have a go at it. So yeah, that's really gratifying.
We've got a couple of questions in from Dave there. We've seen an IPA take out top spot. Do you think there's ever a chance we'll see a sour beer get to top spot? Luke, maybe you want to comment on that one first?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm surprised that sours probably haven't hit the top 10 really that I can think of. I'm just kind of casting my eye over, and it's a while before you get to a sour. And one of the things I think a lot of the audience for sours in Australia, or the volume, is people that aren't super engaged in something like this. Some breweries, I know Colonial, and I think their Southwest Sour doesn't.
Colonial would be the top one, I would think. That would be the one that comes to mind for sure.
Yeah. They got 61st.
Yeah, and I know that they move a reasonable amount of volume on that on tap at venues that you might not associate with craft beer. And I think they're kind of building an audience I think it's incredible. They're building an audience that's not, they don't know what this is. They just know they quite like the sour beer. And I'm assuming, Steve, the smash beers are probably building a similar audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think when you realize, like these days, obviously there's 5 beers that you can vote for. Used to be 10, but has been 5 for many years now. But when you got 5 votes, I think that the more engaged beer fans are voting. A sour beer may not be in their top 5, and I absolutely agree with you that I think that increasingly the number of people or the type of people who are drinking sours are not probably predisposed for going online and voting in a poll of this nature. So I don't know whether they're creeping up. I don't know where Colonial ranked last year, unfortunately, but
I reckon it was higher. I actually reckon sour last year would have been in the 30s or the 40s. That's my gut.
I guess the other aspect of that is the sours that the people are voting that are engaged with. You think of the Wildflowers and the Dollar Bills and those kind of boundary pushing ones. They don't have the volume. They don't get out far enough to get the votes. I don't think so. It probably would be a kettle sour or a blend of ice style, or one of those easier drinking styles, but. We never thought an IPA would kind of topple it at this kind of volume that it's doing now. There's so many people voting an IPA up. So, I think it could be a sour one day for sure.
Great. And Steve, got a question in from John. In your previous role as part of the ownership group of GABS, in chats with retailers like Dan's as a sponsor, how serious do you think they take this poll? Do they actually just want to have their name on it because they've got, a great audience to reach to, or do they actually, care about it and want to be more integrated and feel like a part of it?
Listen, I can't talk to the last two, but in early days, like Dan's probably only became involved about 4 years ago, I'm guessing. And listen, in those first couple of years, it was pretty cursory involvement. It wasn't significant. That's why when I heard that someone or people thought it was the Dan Murphy's Hottest 100, it was I kind of joked about it because they didn't really do anything with it, and certainly I don't think there was any sponsorship funds or anything provided to support it. It was really just an extension of their support of GABS, where they've been the supporter. The founding sponsor of GABS since day dot, pretty much. And but I think there was at one point I went into Dan's early on, or I think maybe Kirli Waldhorn might have told me, is that she went in and she saw the Hottest 100 on a wall, printed out the poster that we used to produce on the wall, and there were scribbles on it and marks on it. And it became really apparent to me then that not only the likes of Dan's, but also independents had their posters up on their wall. Yep. So customers could view it. Even in New Zealand, I saw the GABS Hottest 100 New Zealand beers a couple of years ago when I was there for GABS Auckland. In some Auckland bottle shop, they had the Hottest 100 up there. So I think the retailers and bottle shops, independents, everyone who sells beer takes an interest some description in what the hottest 100 spits out. And I clearly remember when Pirate Life topped the poll, I think 3, maybe 4 years ago, that was really when I noticed the impact and influence of the event, when I heard how many phone calls they got and how many new accounts they won as a result of their rapid rise in the hottest 100. And that was a bit of an eye opener for us. And then, of course, Pirate Life said that to them, that sort of position in the poll, or the winning the poll, was a better accolade than winning, champion beer or best beer at any of the peer judged awards. So that's how it's kind of evolved. Yeah.
Yeah, great. So I guess that. Oh, sorry, Luke, you go.
I was just going to say the Dan Murphy's thing. I think there are people at Dan Murphy's that absolutely support all of what we're trying to do and what we've always loved to do by making delicious beer. And speaking to my role with Good Beer Week or the Brewers Association, I know that if we're putting together a panel, there's someone from Dan Murphy's that's really keen to come in and speak to quality of beer and pass on their knowledge to the smaller retailers. They're really keen to do that. And while if I'm doing my shopping for beer, I'm probably I will be going to my local independent shop. It's really cool to see the top end of town, willing to share their knowledge and get involved in things like this. So I think people there do definitely love and care about this.
Yeah.
And Dan Murphy's heavily invest in, staff training and bringing people into specific roles to talk about the quality of beer and talk about, knowledge of beer and get, more consumers interested in beer. They've always supported craft beer. They might not be independent, but they've always supported craft beer, and they continue to support craft beer heavily. And obviously, there's a few people around Australia that buy their beer from Dan. So we shouldn't. They're probably one of the leading retailers around Australia. So we should give them a little pat on the back for supporting, craft beer like they have. We've obviously had to do with Dan's, and they've been absolutely always fantastic to deal with. Never had any issues. But
I would just second that. Is that in the early days of their sponsorship of GABS, they were a little less engaged, but there was an occasion about 5 or 6 years ago where it shifted significantly, and I've only got great things, and I've got no kind of vested interest in it anymore. But Dan Murphy's have been, in the last half a dozen years, have been highly engaged with the GABS Festival and the Hottest 100. I think the reason we got them involved with the Hottest 100 was because I really wanted to release a variety pack to kind of showcase some of the better beers after the results had come out. And they were supportive of that, and that did well, and they've done that ever since. But to your point, I think they've been leaders, and with the influence that they have in the market, I think that they've done a fantastic job. And long may they continue to support GABS and the Hottest 100, because I don't think I think they're head and shoulders above some alternatives.
Yeah, for sure.
From a chain point of view, certainly. Yeah,
definitely. So maybe we go back to the Hottest 100 and just talk about maybe where does it go from here? What are we going to see it migrate into? There's a few comments up. Hottest Indie 100. I know that's one of the lists that you do anyway. Just quickly, Nigel's posted about that guy who wanted to pay by cash. Apparently, he said he's just given me a little apology and said sorry about that, Rich. He posted on our group, so that's good to see. Someone's listening and take it in. That's fantastic. But Steve, where do you think GABS will go? Where do we see it going now in the next few years? I've got a few thoughts, but you might jump in first if you can.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot because that was one of my questions to you, because I'm always eager to hear what other people think. Listen, the original essence of the Hottest 100, where, as I said, all the way back then, was for people to genuinely vote for what they thought were their favourite 5 or 10 beers of the year. And I think, honestly, there's not a huge number of people who do that these days. So I would love to somehow see if there are ways that it could come back, or we could the pendulum could swing a little bit back towards a more, as much as possible, because the genie might be out of the bottle. But I would like to see more people vote for the 5 beers that genuinely they loved and not so much be led by some brewers that kind of direct people how to vote. And listen, those brewers, by the way, are playing within the current rules. So there's nothing wrong with what they've done. But I think it is a little bit removed these days from the spirit of it. So I'd like to see people vote and encouraged to vote for their 5 favourite beers. Now, there's a whole spectrum of where you go on that. But I guess the one that I'd most like to see is to disallow brewers from asking people to vote for specific beers. So, and I've done that, you've done that. There's a whole bunch, most brewers have done that. So I'd like people to say, vote for Bent Spoke, vote for Stomping Ground, vote for Ballistic, vote for anyone. I think I'd like to see that as a starting point. And for those, and for brewers genuinely to encourage people to vote for their favourite beers. By the way, I don't think it would affect, I'd expect to see Bent Spoke at or near the top of the pile next year anyway, even with those rule changes. But that's the thing that I most struggle with, is that the original idea that we had and that I nurtured and we nurtured for those years until we sold it to Mike it's a long way from that now. And I think that there's a way that we can still engage brewers and that for them to be as fantastically creative as they have been in calling for votes. But I do think that it's kind of, I'd like to see the pendulum come back a little. That's my own view.
And Luke, are you on the same boat? Do you think it's possible to actually bring back a bit of control and be able to police it and make it fair? Because I think that's probably one of my biggest worries. Is I'm sort of on board with that, Steve, but I'm just wondering if it would be a fair playing field. Mike would have to invest into that. Obviously, the new owner being Mike, in policing the competition, I suppose, more heavily.
I think all of this is I've said to Mike, so I'm not saying anything that I haven't already said to him. And I think he understands that the Hottest 100 has become this valuable and important and influential vote. He clearly doesn't want to stuff it up. And I think he recognises that there might need to be tweaks made, and the rules that are in place now are word perfect almost to what they were 11 or 12 years ago. So I think it's just time, but it would absolutely not only involve GABS policing it, but to our point earlier is I suspect that beer fans would also be arguably on the front line in helping GABS keep people on the straight and narrow. And I think one of the other points I wanted to make was that if some changes aren't made, I worry a lot that brewers and beer fans will, and listen, you can't please all people all the time, but I think that there is a growing chance that some brewers, and I know in Tasmania, there's one example I heard on Brews News the other day, is I think that brewers and participants and a worrying number of them will become disengaged. And that was never the idea, is I don't care whether you make one barrel or one keg of a beer, if that's your favourite of the year, vote for that. And as a brewer, I'd like you to list that beer, not just like some brewers do, vote for the beer that they want people or instructing people to vote for. So I think that you can do it, but it takes a commitment. And I would contend that there wouldn't be many people who would be upset with these sort of rule changes, because why would you be upset? This is just kind of, I think, an only positive thing. That's my thoughts.
From I probably almost go, and I've thought about this a lot, because one of the things that we talked about over the years, and I'm sure I've chatted with you about this, Steve, is the newest beers could be the list. It's only beers brewed this year, and that is a secondary list at the moment. But that now I think we have enough beers brewed in a year for that to be easily possible, and I don't think we ever thought that would be the case. But I kind of like it the way it is, and I kind of like watching. It's not an annual shake-up, but it's a slow drift towards different styles and different changes that is quite fascinating to me. I've got the list next to me here, and I'm looking at Black Hops Goat and Ballistic Hawaiian Haze, which made it into the top 10 from miles back. And I know both breweries, they did kind of push them as the beers to vote for. But, below them is Bolter Hazy. Hazy beer didn't figure on the list until I think 2018.
Yeah.
And people look at this and go, "Oh, it's the same every year," but really, this is a complete turnaround from 2 years ago.
Yeah,
Only for, I mean, at least for those three. And I think Stonewall Pacific Ale is always going to kind of be up there, but it's kind of cool to watch those slow drifts happening in a longer term point of view. And I think if you were to do, say, hottest 100 new beers of the year, it probably alienates a lot of people that aren't familiar with any of these beers. And I really enjoy seeing the comments of, they tag their friend and say, "Oh, look at this list of beers. There's a whole lot of beers that we've never tried." And to me, that's really that's the cool part of this is, the people that want Mountain Culture to win number one, they're already fully engaged. To be able to put this list in front of people that have never heard of Crankshaft, they're going to go, "Whoa, this is new to me."
Well, I guess the question there is, and that Mountain Culture is a good example. Why wasn't it in the list?
They didn't enter their beers.
Hang on. I'll just the breweries are asked to enter their beers, but every year, if anyone recommends or suggests that they'd like to vote for a beer, every year for the last 12 years, we've entered those beers. So it's and that has taken a fair bit of time to do that. But I don't like it when breweries just enter, their pale ale because that's what they want, direct people to their votes. But we've entered any beer that's ever been requested of people.
And in the case of Mountain Culture, they've just announced a big expansion. The founders have just had a baby. They're very busy. There's another kind of cool aspect. I was chatting to Ian from Slipstream on my podcast, and they didn't enter, or they didn't really pay any attention to it. I think their beers might have been in, but they didn't do any promotion because they're expanding at the moment. They're too busy. So there's these kind of, this doesn't tell the complete story, and this doesn't drive everyone's purchasing decisions for the next 12 months. There are breweries that are still filling tap rooms every weekend that don't feature on this, and they don't have time, or they don't really care. So while it does mean it's quite far from the point of, Steve, what you're saying is, that original, just the list that we all think is the best.
Not the best, the hottest.
The hottest, sorry. But, as you vote for your favourites for that 5 year, and that's how I always vote. As I said, none of my votes ever make it in the top 100. And I keep true to the spirit of it, but I also see so much value in this list that we have every year is that, I'm okay with it. And that's probably as a consumer perspective of looking at it and going, "Oh, cool. Yeah, good work, Crankshaft. I'm going to, do my article and then I'm going to move along with my life." Because I don't really,
I think one of the things that I get EDMs from multiple breweries, and I get despondent when I see breweries, some breweries, asking vote 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for our beers. That happens more than many people know, and that just to me is just there are various. I'm going to use the term algorithms, but it's much more manual than that. But there are processes, and that the GABS team, I presume, still have, that we've developed over the last 12 years to kind of weed out poll votes cast that we deem to be against the spirit of the poll. So those ones are an obvious one, but I think that the new beers, as you say, it's the difference, I guess, between the hottest Triple J, hottest 100 and ours, is that new beers, there aren't enough people who are trying 5 or so new beers, and the poll has certainly always been aimed at everybody who drinks beer. So that's why Hahn Premium and Crown got in the first year, is because that's what some people voted for. But at least I know that they were genuinely people who like them.
And
I don't think we could quite go to new beers just yet. I hear you, Luke. There's enough beers that come out every year, but I feel like Steve just said, there's not probably enough people trying enough new beers. There's a lot of people trying new beers, but there's also not enough people trying new beers to really make it. I think that's my opinion. The only thing I'll say is I think we should put it all back in the hands of the people, because this is the hottest 100. It's all about the people who love a beer and vote for it. So we shouldn't be asking breweries to nominate their beers. We should figure out a way to have, the only way your beers can get in it is if the punters, the people who buy the beer, nominate the beer. And I don't know how that would work. Like, we'd have to figure it out. You'd have to figure it out a little bit, not me, but you'd have to figure it out a little bit. Mike will have to figure it out a little bit. But maybe there's some sort of, look, maybe you've got to get, maybe you've got to do a pre-selection. I hate to bring up the whole political thing, but maybe there's got to be a bit of pre-selection. The punters put in their beers, and then the ones that get multiple votes or 5 votes or a number get to go into the main ring, and we go from there. But it's all to do with the punters. It's not to do with Ben Spoke putting in their 5 beers and another brewery putting in their 5 beers. It's literally in the hands of the punters deciding what beers they want in the hottest 100. I don't have all the answers there, but that's sort of where I feel would make a bit of a difference.
Well, I certainly agree with the sentiment of that. That's kind of what I was trying to say earlier on, is that I think it used to be about, you're as a beer lover, vote for your 5 favourite beers, rather than now I think it's about the brewers saying, please vote for these beers, or whether it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever it might be. And in the early days, people did enter the beers themselves, but it became rapidly a nightmare very, very quickly of having to decipher what people were entering and merging beers that people would call spelled differently, or whatever it might be.
Yeah, so you'd have to come up with a list, and then you'd have to send it to the brewery and say, hey, these beers have been nominated. Are these all being commercially for sale? And then there'll be a bit of to and fro, but at least I think you give it back to the people to decide what beers they want in the, maybe it's the top 200. Maybe you've got to pre-select the 200 beers or 300 or whatever it is, and then you vote. These are the options. You haven't got options outside the 200, and maybe that's that. I think that would be helpful to, to filter out some of the potential brewery bias in what the communications they have with their fans and their supporters.
I'll still come back to that first thing, though, is that, again, and maybe I'm just hung up on this original idea, is that as I said, if you like a Ben Spoke beer or a Mountain Culture beer that they brewed 3 kegs of, if that was one of your 5 favourite beers of the year, I would love to see, if it might not be on the list, but you should be able to request it and have it added. So that, to me, is I'd like people to be able to vote for whatever beers, 5 beers, whatever they were made for. I'd love people to vote for that. But can I ask you both, given what I suggested before about if brewers were only allowed to promote in creative ways that they often do, like you guys do and Larry do, if it was just vote for your brewery, vote for Ben Spoke at the hottest 100, what would be the downside of that? As opposed to, and we did it with Gibb Street this year, and you've done it, so we've all played the game, or many of us have played the game. What do you think would be the downside of just saying vote for your brewery in the hottest 100, or support us in the hottest 100, without saying vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5?
Well, you're simply going to end up with the hottest 100 breweries, not hottest 100 beers.
But are you saying, Steve, vote for the brewery, but you still need to vote for a beer within that?
Yes, because you're not voting. Sorry, you still have to vote for a beer, but It's like vote for our, Ben Spoke, vote for our beers in the hottest 100, as opposed to.
I'm all for it. I'm absolutely all for it. I mean, you as a brewery, you get to promote yourself as a brewery. You don't get to promote individual beers, but you'd want to see a level playing field.
What can you explain? Because it has to be a level playing field insofar as there are breweries of different sizes, but I would love a brewery in Tasmania, which completely this year they were effectively disengaged, as I understand it. I want this to be an inclusive thing. So when we talk about new beers and so forth, to me that's not fully inclusive. I want anyone who likes craft or indie beers to be able to vote for whatever beers they like. I want the little tiniest brewery in Northern Territory or Hobart to be able to engage their customers to vote for their beers. But I want them to be invested in it. But I reckon just being able to say vote for our brewery's beers in the hottest 100, I think that would be a step in the right direction. I'm not saying it's going to solve all the problems, because I'm not sure all the problems can be solved. But I think that can you speak to what you were saying about level playing field, which I would agree with in sentiment, but what do you mean by that?
Oh, well, it's just policing it. It's just like a massive job to police, all the outputs from 700 breweries in Australia and make sure that everyone's, going about it in the spirit of the competition.
We've disqualified brewers in the past. I don't know if you remember this, and I know this was somewhat inadvertent, but Four Pines, you might remember this, Luke. I don't remember the year, but Four Pines ran some posts or promotions that encouraged people to vote in return for some prize, I think, from memory. Mm-hmm. And we disqualified them from the poll from memory. And so I think that I think if you spell out the rules from the outset, and we communicate with all these breweries, and then rely on not only the GABS resources but also all the beer fans around the world, I can tell you there'd be plenty of beer fans who will be policing it. And I think you can do it. And I think I think GABS should try and do it. Is my view. And I don't see why anyone would be upset about it, because it's really still. It's putting it, to your point earlier, Rich, I think it's putting it back on the people to vote for their 5 favourite beers, as opposed to vote 1 this, vote 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this.
One of the interesting things about that, though, Brick Lane had the radio ads on Triple M, so they probably reached the biggest audience, using Mick Malloy. But, their beers didn't, they polled, but they certainly didn't light things on fire.
They got 4 beers in.
4 beers in, yeah. And they're probably, they probably needs a couple of years for them to mature as a brand in people's minds. But
I disagree. I reckon they've severely underachieved, and they'd be a bit of a laughing stock of the industry. I reckon at the moment, considering how vocal they were in terms of having people driving on forklifts that didn't have forklift licenses and all the rest of it, to only reach where they did. I think. I reckon internally they'd be slightly embarrassed. I mean, I would be. I reckon I was tipping them to make a top 20. I was really surprised when they bombed out so early. And that's what happens. It can backfire on you if you don't have the following, or you don't have the engaged, your engaged community, your engaged, members that are will hopefully do anything for you. I think, Mick Malloy's. I wonder what all his friends are saying right now, Mick. How was that little forklift journey you did? Did that actually end up in top 50? That's great, Mick. Well done. Sort of thing. That's my take on that one.
There's tomorrow's headline, Luke.
Yeah.
Tomorrow's headline. But the other point I just quickly wanted to make is the opposite. I don't think it's going to happen anymore. But if you remember, Vale Ale won the poll in, I'm going to say, 2012 or so, 4 years in. They topped the poll, running a campaign which is not dissimilar to what breweries do now, but they ran it well. The voting numbers were much lower than they are now, and they were able to top the poll and have a few other beers, I think, do quite well as well. But they actually, by playing by the rules, albeit they were passionate about their marketing, is that there was a bit of a backlash when they overachieved. So I wonder if there's the opposite effect, that and I heard this on Brews News the other day, expressed by someone that maybe it was, I don't know who it was, but someone talked about if you get too high, you could actually kind of be cut down, and that could be a negative thing. So what are your thoughts about that?
I've got a couple of things to add to that. The Brick Lane Draft was actually one of my votes, and I noticed that poll. I just checked. I really like that beer. I think it was delicious. Being aware of the...
I think we should just put a quick call out there. I might just say that John Selton makes fantastic beers at Brick Lane, and results in the Hottest 100 do no way diminish the quality of the beers that come out of there. It was just funny to see that the marketing impetus they put behind it potentially didn't deliver the same quality as the beer.
And I think that's what I was speaking to at the start of, you still need to get people engaged in your brand to vote for it. So even though, what we talk about, the list and the mailers say vote these 5 beers, they still actually have to go and do it, and they still have to be motivated to go and do it by the beer and by the brand. And I think that's maybe a secondary thing of, the marketing, the network of getting your beer into people's hands is all part of a brewery now. So you need to have all those ducks in a row. You can make and I guess Mountain Culture is a great example. You can make some of the best beer in Australia, but they're not reaching the audience and they're not doing the marketing for it, so they're not going to hit the list. And that's no discredit to them. Of course, they do an amazing job, but that the top 10 are doing so many things right, and I think we need to kind of make sure that I think people need to realize how hard it is to reach that top 10.
Luke, there is a stat that I saw in Crafty Pints analysis, and I'm not sure what the trend has been over more than the last couple of years, but it's certainly something that I'm mindful of, is that fewer brewers are getting more beers in the poll. I think there was, and there are some two breweries got 7, I think, Capital and what was the other one? Capital. Black Ops got 7, and then there was 5 breweries, I think, that got 5 beers. So, and there are fewer breweries getting more beers in the poll, and I think that's a trend that certainly increased in trend since last year to this year, and I think it's increasing from the previous years as well. Do you see that as being an issue, either one of you, that it's possible that in 2 or 3 years or 4 years' time, especially if people are voting 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, is that you'll see fewer brewers hog most of those more spots?
If they're getting 7 beers, it probably means that people are voting, for beers outside of that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, which is probably a good thing. But someone did kind of make the point, and I haven't done the math on it, but a lot of the Capital beers and the Black Ops beers came really close together. And so it would be interesting to check how they were, saying to their fans, vote for these 5 beers, how that correlates to where those beers actually landed in the poll, which would probably give the answer to what you're saying there in terms of it might end up being we've got 20 breweries with 5 beers each. Is my math? Yeah, my math's right there. Yeah. And that would obviously be a disaster for everyone. But I'm not sure that would, I still think they've still motivated. They've really got their fans behind those beers, and it's up to their brewery down the road now. It's up to Benspoke to steal the Capital brewery support now, or it's up to Capital to steal your support. Make something
it's interesting when we'll talk about our mates around the corner at Capital, and they ran a campaign based on their 2 beers, Coastdale and XPA, and I had them down as a dead cert to break into the top 10 this year. I think they fully deserved it. But it's interesting that their 2 beers they based their marketing behind. I think they came, was it 12th and 13th or 11th and 12th?
13th, 14th. I can see it right now.
14th, yeah, so they came right together. So that is interesting that they had that campaign really for those 2 beers. And I think their other beers sort of filtered around the 50th mark, something like that. Maybe there was one, I think, Trail or Rock
46. Trail was 46. But these are within the rules. So these guys are not breaking the rules, and because I don't have any tolerance for anyone who's breaking the rules, but these guys everyone's playing by the rules as far as I understand it. It's just whether it's in the spirit. And what's the spirit of the poll? Well, I've got my own version of it because I started it 12 years ago, but to me I
should clarify, Steve, that Benspoke we were definitely advising people to vote for our 5 beers, and they ended up coming in the order that we asked people to vote in. I do believe, I have to double check that. Maybe Sprocket was around the wrong way, but Cluster 8 might have been around the wrong way. But, we haven't released Cluster 8 since, that might be September last year. So that was a surprise for us to keep that position. It seems to sort of ebb and flow a bit. But having basically 5 beers in the top 32 was, it was amazing for us and pretty humbled by it, to be honest, because Red Nut was 55th or something last year. So it's actually, Red Nut's debuted at 23 or something, 25 maybe, and then gone back out to 55. And we thought by the time we got counted down this year to 50, I said, Red Nut's done. It's not even in the top 100 this year, and then to see it pop up at 32 was, that was pretty surprising, funnily enough. But we had them basically in the order that we asked people to do it. We did it. I don't know. Our fans love it. they sort of come back to us and go, well, and there's a question up there, like Crankshaft did really well, but my favourite beer is Sprocket. Why doesn't Sprocket do really well? Well, I like a Sprocket as well as a Crankshaft. In fact, I've got one right here, but I don't know. I think Sprocket's probably not that beer you're going to have a 4-pack of. At 7%. So I think Crankshaft at 5.8 is likely to reach a few more people because people can have a few good beers. So I know what you're saying, Steve. It's not in the spirit of the comp, but then I guess what we've got to do is define what the spirit of the comp is.
Well, is it possible? Do you think one person's definition of the spirit of the poll is I could ask you two, and we'd all have a different point of view. So I think it's up to GABS to, in some ways, own that, whatever that is. And as I said, and I'm at pains to say, you guys and many others play within the rules. It's just whether after 12 years, maybe it's just a evolution of the poll rather than a revolution.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with those two words, for sure. And I think what I was trying to say earlier was, let's put everything back in the hands of the punters, the enthusiasts, the customers who spend their hard-earned money on our beer, and let's take everything away from the breweries if we can. I mean, I'd be totally supportive of that.
Well, I have to say the most severe thing that I can come up with in terms of trying to tweak it is that literally brewers can promote the poll, but it's kind of with GABS provided assets that say, just vote in the hottest 100 poll. But to me, I think it can be a transition. I do think that the suggestion I've made tonight.
Communist, is it?
Sorry?
For a beer poll?
What's that, say again?
Is that a bit communist for a beer poll?
Well, exactly. So I think that's
nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. So I think, because I love the creativity that many brewers increasingly are using, and I don't want to stymie that, but so that's why I think the idea of just with this change, it's not a massive change, and I'd be surprised. I'd love to know why any brewery would not want to support that, and also beer fans, I think, would wholeheartedly support it. We might get more brewers participating and engaged in it, and more beer fans.
We just got a stat through. Sorry, Luke, won't be a sec. GABS, I've just got a stat through from GABS that 1,951 beers received at least one vote this year. And I think that shows just how many people actually vote for personal preference.
1,950.
The top 100. 1,951 beers received one vote. How good's that? That's actually that's something worth lifting a can to, I think, because that shows that people are voting for what they thanks, Luke, what they like, Really.
Hang on, I've got Steve's here as well.
Oh. Sitting on the fence.
Yeah. I guess it's weird being, both of your breweries did push particular beers, vote for our beer and vote for this beer, and you guys are saying let's get rid of that. Whereas I'm probably the voice of the consumer in this conversation, and I'm on the fence. I'm on the side of I think it works quite well the way it is. As I said, I enjoy seeing the evolution of it. I think the evolution reflects the trend in the bottle shop, and I think it reflects the market out there quite strongly. We forget that the market, I guess, as consumers, we forget the market isn't the super engaged consumers. It's the guy at the bottle shop today when I've got this Crankshaft, and he said, Ben Spoke beer, my mate really likes it, I should give it a go. And that's a really cool aspect of the market that I think we forget about. But in saying that, Steve, I do really like your idea of you can't advertise how people should vote. Don't mention your beers, just mention the polls on. I think that also works as well. So, for me, I'm okay if it doesn't change though.
Okay, that's good. That's really good. I think one thing we need to consider in all of this, and just a couple of little questions up there. Jason said, how about bringing back Bob's Armpit, Richard? Unfortunately, Bob's Armpit was a great beer we used to brew at the Wigan Pen. I'd really like to sort of keep that at retired as a Wigan Pen beer. If you've had our Mother Funker, it's certainly along the lines of Bob's Armpit. So I think maybe watch out later on in the year. You might see that somewhere easier to get. Nigel, he said, how about a double version of Red Nut? Nigel, we did one of those beers a while ago, but you're right. You're telling me I'm the only current Canberra brewer not to do one. So let's get that done. Let's organise that and brew that beer for sure. What's next for Ben Spoke by Megan? That's a good question. We're flying along at the moment. We've got some big expansion going on. We chucked solar on the roof this week. We've got an automation upgrade going on. We've got a pack line expansion. We still want to keep making a different beer every couple of weeks in the brew pub. That's what we've got going on at the moment. I can't really think too far into 22, but 22 it'd be good to really cement a barrel age program that we can take nationally. You've heard it here first. So I guess that leads into what are we going to do with the craft beer industry in Australia and how is it travelling at the moment? And I think it's sort of directly related back to the Hottest 100, because as the craft beer industry in Australia grows at the rate that it's growing, we're going to be sitting here next year with 800 breweries. Is it sustainable? Is the amount of brewery growth sustainable for our population? Luke, you're probably pretty close to this, so I reckon, speaking to plenty of brewers in your role. What are your thoughts on that?
It's hard to give an answer to that because we were asking this question in 2012 and 2014, and we thought, nah, there's no way. We've got too many now. And then it's just exploded further. And it probably isn't sustainable in terms of growth. I think people are really excited by new products and what beer can do. And I think beer can do a lot more than other products because beer can do non-alcoholic beer really easily. It can do sour. It can fit into that world of cocktails quite easily. I think a lot of brewers do beers that mimic cocktails. It can also fit into beer that tastes a lot like wine and fills that space. And then with all that stuff happening, it's still the beer at the end of the day. The beer that you take to the barbecue is still there as well. So I think there is probably more growth left. There's breweries still opening up, and there's tap rooms are full all around. And I think beer, the great democracy of beer, it's been a through line through, I guess, European society for so long that we're almost getting back to that where in Europe the local brewery was kind of the centerpiece in town in a lot of countries, and the mayor was the brewer. And I feel like that's almost coming back to that rather than a new thing. It's kind of getting rid of the industrialized big lager. That was only 120 years, it's probably even 60 years once you kind of pull the threads out. So it's almost, to me, lager is the trend. That big industrial lager was the trend that we're now kind of, we're taking that down and we're getting back to how it always was, where there's a brewery in every suburb and, maybe we've got 2 or 3 in some suburbs, but I don't know where that means in terms of growth, but I think people are selling beer and doing all right, and there's still room to grow that. So, yeah, I think there's still room.
Steve?
Listen, to just riff off what Luke said, I think it depends on how you define a brewery. I think that there are a growing number of breweries, small breweries, who are feeling the pinch of competition. But I think, and therefore, I think there'll be some consolidation of some sort in that area. But I think if you look at the brew pub model, where the way I define it at least is you're brewing beer that you're serving only in your own venue out of mostly out of off the tap, is I think we're under indexed still. I think if you look at America, I think 60%, something like that, of all their listed breweries are brew pubs. And I remember speaking to James Atkinson, another great beer writer, about 3 years ago, and saying that I just see so much opportunity in true brew pubs. And so I think that there is plenty more opportunity for brew pubs who are just not enticed or excited by the idea of competing for taps in town and shelf space in bottle shops, and enjoying the freedom of making the margin of their own beer, but also brewing whatever they goddamn want, and being at the coalface and serving the beer to the customer who's going to tell them whether it sucks or it shines. And I think that brew pubs, I think we can accommodate thousands. Breweries who want to wholesale and compete for shelf and tap space, man, it's getting really hard out there. And there are many breweries some household names, some not so much, who are not, it's been exacerbated by COVID, but I think it's there's brewers of all sizes who are feeling the pinch a little bit. So that's my view. Brew pubs, bring them on.
Yeah, you might have heard me say this before, and I've certainly said it a number of times on the show. There's only two models that work. You're really, really small and you have a brew pub, and you make the beer and you serve it in the brew pub, or you're really, really big and you can make beer at a volume that you can actually make $1 on selling beer wholesale. And there is no in between. A lot of breweries are in between, and that's my biggest fear. If you don't have a brew pub or you don't have that retail offering, you can't engage with your customers. And I think the biggest learning curve for us was that we had a tap room. We could see the expressions on people's faces when they try a new beer, whether it's good or bad. You get that feedback right there when you're actually brewing beer, and it's invaluable. And even to this day, we still brew crankshaft in our brew pub. People say, well, you're crazy. Why don't you just brew it out at the cannery and bring it in? But every single beer we make in the brew pub is brewed in the brew pub, with the exception of a couple of barrel-aged beers. And we'll never change that, because the brew pub is the touch point. It's where customers, give you the rap or pat you on the back. So, and I think that's really important for establishing a community. It's really important for establishing a customer base. And then you can leverage that and obviously decide whether you think you have that customer base to be able to take the beer further afield and potentially set up a production brewery. And we were lucky enough to do that. And I'm a really big believer in these two models. And I agree. I think there's room for, hundreds of brew pubs, and I wish people would open more brew pubs. My fear is that what we're seeing is, and no disrespect to you, Steve, because you've got a few now, but we're seeing people who are successful in setting up a brew pub, opening more brew pubs, because why wouldn't they? They're successful at it. They've got a good model. They understand the ins and outs of running that brew pub business. And what do we want to see, 200 brew pubs run by, 10 breweries around Australia? I don't know how I think about that. It's probably just something I thought of just then. So, but you could see that the successful people who know how to run a brew pub are going to leverage that fact, and good on them for doing it, because brew pubs attract local support, which is exactly what you need to grow. Look, it's been a really good chat. Have you guys got some last words, or a thought that you want to share, or a question, or something like that?
I certainly have a question, because you asked me to prepare one, and I know that you're one of the rare brewers in the country of a brewery of your scale and size who's still on the tools. And I wanted to ask you whether, as you grow and you're becoming fantastically successful and well-deserved, but is there a kind of a tension or a balance that you struggle to balance, I guess, between brewing, being on the tools and brewing all the wonderful beers that you do, and the kind of the production process, I guess, as you get bigger and bigger? How do you kind of balance that those two responsibilities? Because you're a bit of a rarity amongst the big brewers doing your sort of scale and above in the country.
Yeah, it is a good question, Steve, and no doubt it impacts mine, and I should say Tracy's life, pretty heavily. But at the end of the day, if you're lucky enough to do something you love doing every single day, and you can get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, go to work every single day, then that's what I tell people. That if you don't like what you do, you shouldn't do it. You should go and find something you love what you're doing. You've got to love what you do. That's the first thing. You've got to have that, you've got to get up and want to go to work. And I've been lucky enough in my whole life to be able to get up and go to work and love what I do. And I really believe that gives you, the momentum to be able to multitask and do 100 things at once. Look, I realised a while ago that I wasn't capable of running our company, so we put a CEO on to run our company. We've got a great management structure, and I don't have to do anywhere near as much as what I used to have to do. I'm never going to give up brewing, though. Even if I've got to report to someone else, I'll always brew beer, because at the end of the day, that's why we got into this. That's why, we've got everything on the line, and we're trying to make the best beer we possibly can. And I want to be involved in that. That's the fun part, making beer. The day that I can't walk up the stairs onto the brew deck, is the day I'll stop brewing. So as long as I can walk up those stairs, I'm going to keep brewing, because it's something I love doing. It's, we're lucky enough to actually make a product that puts smiles on people's faces. How many people can say that? How many people can say that every day they go to work, they make something that puts a smile on someone's face, that provokes a comment, that provokes a conversation? I mean, a heap of people use this comment, but beer is a conversation. It is all about that. And without having that conversation, or without being able to make that beer, I don't have that conversation. So I'm more motivated than ever, in our business, because we've jumped over a little hurdle, probably, because we've been growing so fast. We've got really good foundations, and it's scaringly exciting what we can achieve in the next 3 to 5 years.
Please don't sell.
Well, what am I going to do? If we were to sell Ben Spoke, what are we going to do? I'm not the person that I can't play golf 7 days a week. So I'm not. We've got no thoughts of. We're part of a family ownership group. Me and Tracy and the Meddings family, and we've got no plans to leave what we do. We love it, and we've got energy. Maybe when I get to 70, we might have a rethink of that. But let's see. Let's worry about that when I get to 70.
You know that you can get these chairs that will take you up to the brew deck. So even at 70, I expect you to go at least till 90. Or Sir Tom in England went to 100. So don't give up yet.
No, well, I think there's easy ways to do that. I think I'll be able to brew from home on a screen, I reckon, by then. So
do it all on your phone these days, right?
Yeah, that's right. Brew on my phone while I'm playing golf. I'll match it on the first, louder on the third, and boil on the fifth, something like that. Luke, you got some end intercession comments there?
I feel like I should as the kind of the journalist here, but I don't actually. So I'm going to fall back on something pretty easy. I'd be curious to know what you guys are really excited to drink or be drinking at the moment that's not your own beer. Is there anything out there that's if you could vote in the hottest 100 now, what would be your vote?
Oh, that's such a good question.
That is a very good question, Steve. You better go first.
People say that when they're stalling for time.
No, listen, sadly, obviously when I was choosing all the beers for the local tap house taps, I would try a wide range of beers all the time. These days, I'm based at Stomping Ground, and my variety has shrunk to Stomping Ground pretty much. So I'm going to pass on that one, but I'm fascinated, Rich.
It's a cop-out.
What would be your 5 votes in the hottest 100 non-bent spoke?
Yeah, my
and
five
you can't vote 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for a brewery, because that's against the spirit of the poll.
This is certainly in no order. It's certainly not 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and it's certainly not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But I guess I reckon Wildflower are one of the leaders in Australia in terms of sour beer production, and what Topher does, I think, is absolutely commended. And it's a shame that maybe he couldn't be in the hottest 100. But I really believe in where he's going and what he's doing, and it's exceptionally unique in Australia to have someone doing that. I mean, I remember back in 2005 when Brad Rogers at Matilda Bay, Brendan Varis at Ferrell, and myself at the Wigan Pen started doing barrel-aged beers, and no one else in Australia was doing them back then. And now to see so many people doing barrel-aged beers, but to see Topher really stand tall and probably be the pick of people making barrel-aged beers in Australia, I think that would certainly be one. I think everyone's talked about them. Mountain Culture certainly, setting the scene alight. They do make really good beers and really good hop-forward balanced beers. I must admit, I'm not on board a heap with the amount of mud that's in their beers. They're really hazy beers, but I really love the hop balance that DJ gets with his hop blends that he uses, and he does a really good job on that. And I think the secret to really good hop-forward beers is the blend. I mean, you've got to get your hop blend right, and Crankshaft's got a hop blend, Sprocket's got a hop blend, Cluster 8's got a hop blend, and all DJ's beers have a hop blend. Sure, there's single hop beers as well, but I think getting that hop blend right is really important. So they would certainly be on my list. Look, Asher, I remember Asher staying at my house way back. Asher, how long was that? 15 years ago or something like that, when he was going to uni in Canberra, and he's really learned his craft really well. Obviously, he's been at quite a few good breweries, but obviously being the head brewer of Stomping Ground, it's not just because you're on the show, Steve. I've always supported and believe in Asher, and he makes probably one of us. He's one of Australia's most variety-driven brewers, and I don't think someone else would potentially in Australia makes the variety of beers that he does. So I think that's a real credit to him, and I think he's really come of age in the last 5 years. And the conversation he had with me about going down and working for Stomping Ground, and it was simply go do it. Don't even think again. Just get on board and just knock it out. So I think he's really, and I think that shows in this special release of beers that you've done. Into the Wood, that I think that's really expressing his techniques and his quality.
Got 2 left.
I've got 2 left. I know one of them. I've got to think of the other one a little bit more.
I just asked one, but I like how you hijacked the question and said, "Nah, give us 5." And you dodged the question, Steve, so that's even better.
No, I'll keep going. I really do believe that Canberra's really lucky to have 2 really good breweries, and I think we sell more beer because Capital's around, and Capital sell more beer because we're around. So Wade out of Capital's been making really good beers. He's obviously had a really good, I guess, upbringing in the craft beer industry coming from San Diego, and his hop forward beers. Lawrence, please let him use a few more hops occasionally. That'd be fantastic. But some of the taproom hop beers that he does are just absolutely cracking beers. And if you haven't been out to Capital and had a hop, one of their hop forward taproom beers, I'd get out there and have that. So a bit of a shout out to them. And probably lastly on the list is there's so many good breweries out there. You could name. You really enjoy what Stone and Wood have obviously achieved. Think about breweries like Two Birds, Feral in their days. Even Moo Brew down in Tassie, and some of the new breweries down there. I'll probably forget someone I should talk about, but I apologise now if I have. Obviously Scotty at Bolter, he was a concreter in Canberra back in the day. He was a home brewer that came to the Wigan Pen and did a brewery tour and suddenly started brewing beer at home. And to see him go through the success that he's had is, it's just amazing. And the beer quality that Bolter do is pretty awesome as well. But I think the last brewery that I'd probably chuck in the mix is Cooper's. They are Australia's still the biggest independent brewery in Australia, and you've got to give them a bit of credit for that, I reckon. And they've really stuck to their mantra of the beers they want to make. Sure, they've had to put out a few different ones like a hazy and whatever, but they're still around. They're still really relevant. They're way bigger than any other independent brewer. And I'd take that as, they've been through the really tough times. Now, with the revolution that's going on in craft beer, I think they've been able to leverage a little bit. I still think there's room for a little IPA there, but maybe they'll knock that out at some point. But I think there you go. There's my 5.
Excellent. Good answer. That was a great answer.
All right, thanks guys for coming on the show. It's been a great little session here, the Hottest 100. It's what we've been doing for the last few hours is talk about beer. So I think we've got to do more of this. Talk about beer. The more things we can talk about beer, the better it's going to be for everyone. The better we're going to get out into the community and get people who are not into the beers that we make, maybe tasting them. And we all know once you taste one of our beers, you're going to go back and get it. So big thanks to Steve, big thanks to Luke, and I'd love to get down to Victoria soon and share a beer with you. Thanks everyone who's listening tonight, and we'll see you again. We're going to do another Bent Brewers Live. That'll be done later in February, and it will be because we have a little beer that made it into the top 100 that currently isn't for sale, that's coming back, and we'll be talking about that. So thanks, Steve. Thanks, Luke. Cheers.
Thank you. Cheers, everyone.
Cheers, everybody. Thanks, mate.